Mary, how do you want Skylar to be remembered?
The happy, loving little girl that she was.
And the smile, that smile could light up a room.
Hello, and thank you so much for clicking onto this video. My name is Kim Coley, and I cover true crime cases and mysteries. If that's something that you're interested in, please consider subscribing down below, and please give my video a thumbs up and share it everywhere. Thank you in advance. So first I want to start off before we begin and apologize for my brief absence. I had to give YouTube a break. These videos take a very long time to film and edit and upload. And I was doing all of this while working a full-time job and completing a master's program. But I'm finally done. Woo-hoo. So I will be posting a lot more often on my channel. Again, I apologize for that brief absence, but I am back in effect. Also, I want to say thank you guys so much for all of your support on my last video, all the comments, all the messages, all the love. I am forever grateful to you guys. So without further ado, let's get started with today's case. This is the case of 16-year-old Skylar Neese, who was brutally murdered by her two best friends. Skylar was born in Star City, West Virginia, and she was the only child to David and Mary Neese. Her mother worked as an administrative assistant in a cardiac lab, and her dad worked at Walmart as a product assembler. Skylar went to University High School, and she had dreams of becoming a criminal defense lawyer.
She was reading way before she was supposed to, doing math and stuff way before she was supposed to, so she was a very intelligent little girl.
Dance for me. Whee!
So Skylar's parents described her as being a daddy's girl, but she also showed both her parents lots of love and attention. So she was very close with her parents. And I think that's worth noting because in the teenage years, many teens tend to shift away from their parents. They're not as under them as much because they are, figuring out who they are. They have gained a social life and they're more concerned with their friends and things like that. So this wasn't the case for Skylar. She was extremely close with both of her parents. Skylar was also described as being a very bubbly person, extremely friendly, and also she was very mature for her age in a good way, meaning that she was very responsible. She was a very hard worker. She had worked at Wendy's part-time, and it was reported that she had never missed a day of work. So this was a young girl that was very ambitious, very driven, and had a bright future. So now I'm going to talk about Skylar and her two best friends, who were Sheila and Rachel Hoff. Skylar first met her best friend Sheila in elementary school at just 8 years old. And it wasn't until Skylar's freshman year of high school that she met Rachel. Skylar and Sheila were extremely close. They spent a ton of time together from elementary school all the way up until high school. And they even started referring to themselves as being sisters rather than just friends. Also, Skylar's parents, they took Sheila in with open arms, and they also referred to her as another daughter to them. The two girls, they would do sleepovers, they would hang out at each other's homes. So everybody knew them as being very, very close. However, as time went on, their classmates and other people around them started to kind of question the friendship because the two girls, especially as they had gotten older, it was becoming more and more apparent that they were complete opposites. Now, Skylar, as I stated before, was more of a reserved person. in a sense, whereas Sheila was more outspoken. She had more of an edginess about her, more of a rebellious nature about her. But nonetheless, despite of these differences, the two girls remained close.
Morgan Lawrence saw a disturbing dynamic firsthand.
I was not a huge fan of Rachel and Sheila.
As far back as freshman year, Morgan had worried that her friend Skyler was heading into a place she might not belong when she became close friends with Rachel and Sheila. Morgan especially didn't like Sheila.
She hung out with the wrong crowd. She had lots of friends that were 20-some years old. That's just a little strange.
Morgan says she'd watched, uneasy, as the three girls became inseparable.
So before I go on, I just wanted to make a quick observation here about these two friends. Now, we all know how the saying goes, opposites attract, right? But sometimes opposites don't actually attract, and you have to be very careful with that. So for me, I like to be around people, or more like-minded people, okay? People that have the same values as me, share the same interests as me. Of course, I'm not looking for somebody to be the exact same as me, but it is important that I associate myself with people that share my core values. And I think, this is just my opinion, I think that the two girls were too different to really be friends. And when this happens, jealousy can arise, resentment. You can start to compare yourself to your friend if that person is dealing with deep-seated insecurities. So when you have a situation like that, things can become very dangerous. Also, I wanted to mention there is a case that has been going around quite often here on YouTube and in the news of Shanquella Robinson, which is very similar to this case, where she went on a vacation to Mexico with several of her quote-unquote friends, and she ended up being killed by one of her friends while the rest of the friends recorded it. So it just goes to show that, you have to really evaluate the people that you allow into your life, because a lot of people will be friends with you and the whole time they don't really like you. They're there because they have these secret agendas. They're there because they are trying to one-up you, or whatever the case may be. So I think the message that I'm trying to get across is you just got to be careful who you allow to get close to you, and friends aren't everything. And don't just have people hanging around you just for the sake of having a friend or having this big friend group, okay? Because a lot of people, when they're dealing with their own stuff, they will try to bring you down in the process. So you just have to have a little bit more discernment when it comes to that. So anyway, moving on. So as I stated before, Skylar meets Rachel her freshman year of high school, and Rachel kind of enters their friend group, and the three girls become very close. They spend a lot of time together. They have dozens and dozens of pictures that they had taken together over the period of about a year. So slowly but surely, Rachel and Sheila began to become a lot more closer than Skylar and Sheila were. Now, it was at this time that Skylar and Rachel began to bicker a little bit. There began to be a lot of tension between the two because Skylar was, of course, trying to, take her friend back that she had known since elementary school, and she didn't want to lose her long-term friend to somebody who they had just met the year before. She was unsuccessful, and she was ultimately cut out of the friend group.
Students told writers Jeff Fuller and Daylene Berry that by mid-sophomore year, the three girls' relationship had begun to deteriorate. They've written about this in their book, The Savage Murder of Skylar Neese.
Sheila and Rachel were dissing Skylar when she wasn't around, and putting her down and that kind of thing. So it was kind of a two-faced situation.
Yeah.
I could definitely tell that they were kind of pushing Skylar away, or at least trying to.
Many of these tweets show Skylar kind of saying like, you know, what happened? I don't really know why they pushed me out. What did I do? You know, she was just very hurt by what had happened, and the girls hadn't really given her an explanation as to why they didn't want to hang out with her anymore. So Skylar felt very betrayed, and this was a very hard time for her. It was also reported around this time through court transcripts that Rachel and Sheila had been gossiping around school, saying that they wished Skylar would just die, that they hated her, they didn't like her. But unfortunately, students never came to police about this because they just brushed it off as everyday high school gossip. But this would be a big mistake.
Students say that around this time, they started hearing Rachel and Sheila discuss the best way to kill someone. And Rachel's friend, Fantasia Liller, recalls a chilling conversation.
Rachel was ranting to me how much she didn't like Skylar one day. Well, she said word for word, I'm pretty sure, was, I wouldn't mind if she died at this point.
Skylar told me one night that Sheila and Rachel had been drinking, and Sheila and Rachel had sex with each other, and Skylar kind of didn't really know what to do. I was shocked when I heard about Sheila and Rachel being sexually involved with each other. I don't know.
Did she ever say anything to either of you about anything like this?
She did not, no. I will say, though, I did read that exact same post in her journal that you just said, yes.
The post said what?
That she had been locked in the bedroom.
I see. She recounted that
Yeah,
specific
exactly.
on that night. So you're confident that it did happen?
Yeah.
Because she wrote it in real time
Exactly.
in her diary. What did you think when you read that?
I was shocked.
So on the night of July 5th, Skylar was at work at Wendy's. She gets home.
On Thursday, July 5th, 2012, she came home after work and got ready for bed.
She put her arm around her mom, gave her a kiss, and gave her a hug and said, "I love you, Mom." She turned to me and said, "I love you, Dad." And she went to the room.
And Sheila and Rachel are constantly calling her, trying to get her to hang out with them. And at first she's saying, "No, I don't want to go out. You know, what's really going on? Do you girls really like me or do you don't?" But finally, Skylar agrees to sneak out with them that night. Little did Skylar know, Rachel and Sheila had been planning to murder her for months.
As part of the plan, Rachel and Sheila settled on the night of July 5th as the ideal time to kill Skylar.
Earlier that day, Rachel had obtained the shovel from her father's residence. They put it in Sheila's trunk. They brought the clean clothes, cleaning supplies, and according to Rachel, Sheila had provided the kitchen knives.
They called Skylar to say they were on their way over.
Pulled up to the residence.
And there is Skylar, sneaking out in that grainy surveillance video. The car is Sheila's, and inside are Skylar's two best friends.
Skylar gets in the car, and they go driving.
So luckily, the apartment complex where Skylar lived had a camera that showed her getting into the car with Sheila and Rachel around 12:30 a.m. on July 6th. The three girls then drove for about 30 miles and stopped just across the Pennsylvania state border. So at this time, Skylar allegedly didn't find anything suspicious at this point because this was the same location where all three girls had been. It was their little place to smoke marijuana. So finally, they arrive at the location and the three girls get out of the vehicle. The girls then make up a lie and they tell Skylar that they had forgotten the lighter for them to go and smoke with. So Skylar says, "Oh, I brought a lighter," and she goes back to the car to get it. So as soon as Skylar turns her back to them and she is walking to the car to get this lighter, Sheila and Rachel count to 3, and at 3, the girls began to stab Skylar to death. So it was reported that the girls had agreed to count to 3 and then murder Skylar. There was even a post that was put up of the girls bragging about what they had done, which is completely disgusting. So at some point, Skylar attempted to run away, but she was only able to run a few feet before Rachel tackled her to the ground and continued to assault her. Skylar managed to wrestle the knife away from Rachel in an attempt to defend herself, and she ended up cutting Rachel's ankle. After Rachel is injured, Sheila jumps in and she continues to repeatedly stab Skylar until she ended up dying. And it was reported that Skylar was stabbed upwards of 50 times. So at this point, Sheila and Rachel tried to bury Skylar, but they were unable to because the soil where they were was too hard and rocky to dig a hole. So instead, they covered Skylar's body with rocks, branches, and they also covered her with dirt. The two returned to their car, they cleaned themselves up, and they left the scene. So the next morning, Skylar's father gets off of work, and he goes into Skylar's room, and he sees that she isn't there. So finally, after the family could not locate Skylar, they decided to go to the police.
Dave called the police.
I have a daughter that's 16 years old. Apparently she snuck out of her room last night and she hasn't been seen since. None of her friends can get a hold of her. I can't find her.
What's her name?
Skylar Neese.
But unfortunately, Skylar was determined to be a runaway, and an Amber Alert was not immediately issued in connection with her disappearance.
The police didn't issue an Amber Alert since it looked like Skylar left voluntarily.
Once that video came out that she willingly got in this car, they're not going to come out and look for somebody driving around in a car.
So it was at this point that Skylar's parents decided to post missing persons flyers of Skylar around the city. And what makes this case even more disturbing is that both girls, Rachel and Sheila, were also participating in this community search and the hanging up of these missing person flyers around the city.
Skylar's friend Sheila came right over.
She spent a lot of time here telling us that it'll be okay, she'll be home, and I really miss her, I love her, I want her back.
The next day, Sheila sat with Mary on Skylar's bed, both of them crying.
Did it bring you comfort when Sheila would come by, being Skylar's best friend?
It did me a little bit, yeah, knowing that how could Skylar leave her behind?
Mary and Sheila took to the streets together, posting flyers for Skylar.
They would knock on the doors and ask, have you seen this girl?
So of course police called in Sheila and Rachel for interviews because they were the closest people to her at the time. And both of the girls had came up with a story that, yes, they had picked Skylar up that night, but that they had dropped her off in a random location about an hour later, and that they hadn't seen her since, and they had no clue where she was going.
But investigators were convinced the two girls knew more than they were saying.
Was it sort of the belief that, look, nobody's in trouble, we just want to know where she is?
Yeah, we just need to know what happened.
That fall, Ronnie Gaskins interviewed each girl repeatedly.
How was Sheila's demeanor in these meetings you would have with her?
Calm, collect, just would look at you right in the face, right in your eyes.
He says Rachel seemed distracted.
She would draw on the desk, play with the pencil. Just her nonverbal cues spoke a lot.
Their story never varied. They picked Skylar up, drove around Morgantown, smoked a little pot, and dropped her off a few blocks from home.
It was like a recording with these two.
Mary and Dave Neese, desperate to find their daughter, thought the police were wasting their time investigating the girls they knew so well.
I even went to the police and said, will you leave Sheila alone, please? I said, you guys are harassing her 24/7. The kid's going through enough right now. Leave her alone.
So you defended her?
Oh, God, yeah. She was like our daughter.
So unfortunately, there were a lot of mistakes made in this case in terms of the police and their investigation. There was a lot of missed opportunities to continue to bring the girls in for questioning and, just investigate the case further. For these girls to have gotten off for as long as they did was horrendous.
The locals would whisper in each other's ears and say, how are they still free?
So eventually, Rachel and Sheila returned back to school in the fall, and this is when rumors began to fly. So many people suspected that Rachel and Sheila knew more than what they were letting on to.
Daniel Hovatter was in drama with Rachel and knew how close the three girls were. He wondered if Rachel and Sheila might be helping cover something up for Skylar.
There had been rumors going around, Rachel and Sheila know where she's hiding.
Daniel knew Rachel and Sheila were the last ones to see Skylar. He wondered if they were protecting her, or maybe protecting someone else. Either way, they had to know something.
There were probably a good 3, 4, 5 times where I told Rachel, if you know anything, you need to say what happened or where she's at.
Daniel wasn't alone. Writers Daleen Berry and Jeff Fuller live in the Morgantown area and have written a book about Skylar's case. They've spent hours combing through what kids were saying on social media.
The one thing that stood out to me is that teens were tweeting, Sheila and Rachel had to know something.
Why don't you guys just talk? Just say something.
Yeah.
Tell us what you know.
They had all known previously that there was a lot of tension, that the girls had stopped being friends with Skylar. So it was very strange that as soon as the girls had split up, that all of a sudden Skylar turns up missing. But nonetheless, the girls were able to stay under the radar and avoid further questioning from the police. So it wasn't until problems in Rachel's home life began to escalate that Rachel finally confessed.
At school, kids say Rachel was increasingly rattled.
Rachel seemed distressed. She seemed like she was very upset over something.
She was acting out, getting into more family altercations at home.
So the walls were closing in on Rachel.
County 911, we have an emergency. I have an issue with a 16-year-old daughter of mine. I can't control her anymore.
And then, on December 28th, Rachel apparently snapped. Her upset mother called the police.
She's hitting us, she's screaming, she's running through the neighborhood. Give me the phone. Like, no, this is over, this is over. My husband's trying to contain her.
So after she confesses, police, of course, asks her, what was the motive? Why did they kill Skylar? And the only thing that she could say was that they had killed Skylar because they did not like her and they didn't want to be her friend anymore.
Did you ask Rachel why? Why did you two do this?
She would not give us any specific details other than they just didn't like her. And then when I asked her, what do you mean you didn't like her? Clarify that. She said, oh, nothing, we just didn't like her.
At University High School, confirmation that Skylar had been found dead was heartbreaking.
I was devastated. It was crazy.
Shania called her friend Sheila as soon as she heard the awful news.
I was crying and she was crying.
There was Sheila, suspected murderer, crying tears for Skylar.
And she's like, who do you think could have done this? Why would somebody do that to Skylar?
And Sheila let everybody know how sad she was. She tweeted things like, "Worst day of my whole life. The pain is real. And rest easy, Skylar. You'll always be my best friend. I miss you more than you could ever know." Now authorities told Skylar's parents the whole story. Their daughter's two best friends had killed her.
I think about it every day. I think about the misery my child must have been through. And I'm helpless. I can't help her. She's calling out, help me. You know, why?
Animals got her. They didn't even care.
Nope. They just threw her out like a bag of trash.
A few days later, the police went to Sheila's house with a warrant.
We seized every kitchen knife we could find. And then the FBI seized Sheila's car, and they were able to find presence of DNA in the trunk.
They shipped a sample off to the lab and waited. And then, finally, by mid-April of last year, Ronnie Gaskins got the one critical piece of evidence he needed: confirmation that Skylar's blood had been found in Sheila's trunk.
On top of the video surveillance, the phone records, Rachel's statement, at that point we felt confident we had the probable cause to make the arrest.
On May 1st, 2013, Rachel Shove pleaded guilty to second-degree murder of Skylar Neese. In her plea agreement, the state of West Virginia recommended a sentence of 20 years incarceration. Rachel expressed remorse and apologized to Skylar's family, her own family, and to God during her sentencing.
I don't know if there's a proper way to make this apology, because there are not even words to describe the guilt and remorse that I feel each day for what I've done. I became scared and caught up in something that I did not want to do. I never realized the gravity of my actions and how many people I've hurt.
Skylar's dad, who had once defended the girls, didn't mince words.
Yes, Rachel Shove did cooperate. And Rachel Shove also murdered my daughter in cold blood. She can take her apologies and everything else and sit on them because that's about what they're worth to me and my wife. She has done nothing but make our lives a living hell since this day one.
The date of Sheila's trial was set for January 28 of 2014, and facing the prospect of additional charges being placed on her, she pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Sheila expressed zero remorse and was sentenced to life in prison with mercy under West Virginia law, and she will be eligible for parole after 15 years served. And that brings me to the end of this case. If you are still here, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your support, and I will see you guys in my next video. Until next time.